Welcome to Development Hell. For every horror movie that hits VOD, countless others end up DOA. Development Hell is the podcast dedicated to unearthing these cursed horror productions. We're going to find out what went wrong, and then decide if these titles still stand a shot at the green light. I am your host, Josh Corngut. I am a filmmaker in Toronto, Canada. This podcast is a proud member of the Dread Podcast Network. Available now from Dread, Bad Candy. On Halloween night in New Salem, radio DJs Chili Billy, Corey Taylor, and Paul, played by Zach Galligan, tell a twisted anthology of terrifying local myths that lead to a grim end for small-town residents. So, if you love Slipknot, Gremlins, and horror, this is the film for you. Bad Candy is out now, on demand everywhere, and you can get your hands on the Blu-ray October 10th. All right, hi everybody. Welcome back to a brand new episode of Development Hell. You may or may not be aware that we have begun a brand new miniseries. We have begun our journey into canceled Halloween installments with our new series entitled Halloween is Canceled. So we're going to be doing these every week leading up to the release of Halloween Kills and then actual Halloween itself. Dennis Etchison's Halloween 4, treatment, script, the whole shabil. It didn't get made, but it's very strange, and I'm really excited to talk about it. Today, we have a very special guest with us. We have Josh Millican. Josh, how's it going? Could you introduce yourself to the Development Hell audience?
Editor-in-chief of Dread Central for almost exactly 2 years. All the different shows we've got, but I really love Development Hell. It means a lot to be on the show and to kick it with you.
So exciting having you here.
I gotta mention, you might be, I don't know how much of this is being picked up on my mic, but there are like kids playing in like the little alley right outside my window here. It almost sounds like Halloween or something where you got the kids.
Yes. It's very October 30th vibes, like before Michael shows up. Everything is normal, but like something's weird and probably somebody's dead. Josh, what's your general relationship with the Halloween franchise? Like, what does it mean to you?
It means probably a lot to me, just like it does to anyone who considers themselves a real horror fan. I was born in the mid-'70s, so I was too young to see the first 3 installments when they were in theaters, but I had started watching horror movies on video, VHS. The 80s was this real heyday of R-rated content, even though I'm only 10 years old and whatnot and stuff like that. So I know Myers, I'd seen Halloween and Halloween 2 and Halloween 3, and Halloween 4, this is where, my relationship becomes kind of personal. Halloween 4 is the first movie that I saw in a theater, early high school days. Seeing Halloween 4 in a movie theater, and I thought it was a really great entry. It's the one that ends with Jamie Lloyd girl with the bloody knife and the bloody mask, thinking we're going in this whole new crazy direction. It was really effective. The whole thing was really fun. I've always really liked Halloween 4, because of the time of my life, because I saw it on the big screen. Yeah, so, it's great that we're talking about what could have been an alternative version of Halloween 4. I'm imagining how, 13-year-old Josh would have enjoyed this film. But here's the thing, I got to admit, as far as my relationship with the Halloween franchise, I really fell off with the whole, Halloween franchise in the 1990s. I think I saw Halloween 5, but I really don't remember much of it. And then with the whole H2O, the whole revival thing, some travesty with Busta Rhymes, I wasn't really paying attention to any of that. Yeah, then they ignore the Halloween 4 timeline anyway, so it's kind of like, ignoring the one that I have these great memories of. I saw Halloween 2018. It was either South by Southwest or Fantastic Fest. I forget which one. Fantastic Fest. It must have been Fantastic Fest.
Getting into Halloween 4, it is one of those entries that I really oscillate over the years. I used to really like it as a kid, and then as a young adulthood, I kind of thought, oh, this is cheesy as all hell. I rewatched it today. Actually, I'm back at the place of loving this film. It kind of, more so than a lot of other installments in this series, it kind of captures the suburban horror that the first film really gets. Like, all of it takes place in like a very Halloween 1-esque neighborhood after dark, kind of that suburban horror, and I feel like it kind of got it well. So I'm here for it. The
Yeah,
Halloween 4
yeah.
was directed by Dwight H. Little and written by Alan B. McElroy. It was released on October 21st, 1988. It was made for about $5 million and recouped about $18 million just in North America. So it was a big hit. So yeah, our general feelings about Halloween 4 sounds like it was a big one for you. But watching it again today, I have to say, you know what? I'm here for it again after all these years. Thoughts on Jamie Lloyd, played by Danielle Harris? She pulled it off.
Absolutely, because I was in my early teens when I saw it, so I was older than the Jamie Lloyd character, but this is still an R-rated movie. As a teenager, I thought it was really scary, and as a young teen, I wasn't too much older than Jamie Lloyd to still put myself in her shoes.
By the third act, like, that kid is giving it her everything, and it's impressive. Like, she really nails the emotional beats.
Absolutely, and the end is just it's a shocker. It's a great last scene, last image shocker. It's
wait. So how does it end?
The best.
In case people don't know, what is the ending of Halloween 4?
The ending is kind of like a recreation of the very first scene of the very first Halloween. In Halloween 1978, we see through the clown mask as Michael Myers kills his sister, and at the very end of Halloween 4. It's recreated, except when we turn around and we see who it is, it's not Michael Myers, it's Jamie.
Do you think this was the right direction for the Halloween franchise to take? Obviously, Halloween 3 was a bit of a swing and a miss, I would say, for the franchise in terms of like success. Do you think the direction they took with Halloween 4 was the right move?
It's what happened. So yeah, it was the right move because it couldn't have gone anywhere. But no, I know what you're saying. Like, I think could they have done something different and been equally successful or more successful? Maybe, but I think it was very successful. It's ultimately a very entertaining film.
Yes, and it's been a while since I've seen number 5, but I'm assuming, based on my past experiences, that this is miles ahead of number 5 in quality. Getting into why we're here today, and in case anyone's forgotten, we are here to talk about Dennis Etchison's Lost Halloween 4 script. So this was the original concept that Halloween 4 was going to take. And then in the last minute, our producers kind of got cold feet. They wanted to go a route that they knew would be successful, especially after the flop of Halloween 3. And they went a more traditional slasher, kind of Friday the 13th direction with the 4th film. Before Halloween 4 was Halloween 3. Yeah, so people believe that Halloween 3 really damaged the reputation of the franchise because you took away the iconic Michael Myers and went in a direction that people kind of didn't really grasp, especially at the time. Obviously, number 3 is back in a lot of people's good books nowadays, but at the time, people were just, pissed that Michael Myers wasn't on screen. Do you think Halloween, never mind the finances and the success, do you have any thoughts on Halloween 3?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was an incorrect move at the time. Clearly it wasn't what people wanted. They misread the market. I understand though that their intention had always been to make it more of an anthology. Again, you can't really say it should or shouldn't have been done because it was done. It was a strike, and I'm glad that they at least recognized that it wasn't what the audience was looking for, and they course corrected.
Well, and they almost didn't. Kind of considering going into the horror anthology realm for it, and the Halloween 3 writer Nigel Neal that was all about. So I'm gonna give you, even though you have read Halloween 4. The Dennis Etchison version. I'm going to give you a bit of a backstory, a little bit of the history and context to what was going on. From 1982 to 1986, producers on the project were doing their very best to get John Carpenter and Deborah Hill back involved. These two had made the first 2 films. They really had lightning in a bottle. They obviously had amazing creative chemistry as a duo. And I think that was probably the safest route to go. By 1986, John did sign on. Dennis Etchison was a horror writer at the time in the 80s. He had written a bunch of novelizations of horror movies, including The Fog, Halloween 2, and Halloween 3, which is how this guy got his relationship going with John Carpenter. Stephen King was also a big fan, and so he was tapped to write this new script. It was finished by January 1987, and Joe Dante himself was actually in heavy-duty talks now that you've read it, just to like check in with you, do you think Joe Dante would have been the right pick?
I really love Joe Dante's directorial work, so I think it could have been fantastic. Yeah.
I would have too. I feel like he's got a comedic undertone to his. He was also supposed to be the director for Jaws 3, People Zero, which didn't happen. So I kind of feel like this guy was all over the place. And okay, so we had the script. Joe Dante was involved. John Carpenter was on board to executive produce. Everything was looking good and kosher. But producers were scared. And they thought that this script was just too cerebral to move forward with. John Carpenter, Deborah Hill were really pissed by this decision. And this is what actually prompted them to sell their stakes in the Halloween franchise. And at the end of the day, everything was just left off with Mustafa Akkad, who then could do whatever the hell he wanted. The first thing he did was he fired Dennis Etchison and went with the more traditional slasher route for Halloween 4. So before we start talking about details of Halloween 4, Dennis Etchison's version, do you have any overall thoughts? How did it hit you when you read it this weekend?
I was really impressed with the script for a lot of reasons. First and foremost, I think had this been Halloween 4, had this been made, we would have started using the term meta horror and talking about meta horror 12 years before Scream. I mean, this script, the whole point of this movie is that Michael Myers is the supreme horror villain, you know?
Yeah, and he is. Come on.
It also contains what must be, it would have been the most meta moment in meta horror. There's a scene that we can talk about later, but where they're at a drive-in and they're watching John Carpenter's The Fog as the fog rolls in and the shape is stalking. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Come on.
Oh, hell yes. Hell yes. It's so good, to be honest. I love the way that they play with John Carpenter's works. And Psycho 1, 2, and 3 are also playing in the background. You hear a line about Jason Voorhees as Michael Myers is killing somebody, that basically Michael invented this genre, and all of these guys kind of followed suit. It's making fun of all of them.
There's a moment where Michael Myers is literally superimposed over Jason, and Jason burns away and Michael remains. So
okay, yes, I don't remember much about that moment. What was going on? It was at the drive-in,
that's in the climax of the drive-in when everything's kind of going out of control, and I think that's when one of the characters realized that no one's in the projection booth.
Oh, it's so good. It's very wacky, and I can see why the suits got freaked out, because it's any of the slashers that we were seeing in the mid 80s, and I love that.
Yeah, well, what really struck me too from the very beginning, I'm talking about how meta this is, about how Michael Myers is a supreme horror villain. It opens with a scene that seems right out of A Nightmare on Elm Street. It opens
there's a nightmare in the beginning.
There's a nightmare, and not only that, there's a scene where Michael Myers slices a character in half and emerges from their body. Totally reminded me of Freddy's Revenge. It really did feel like it was okay, you think Freddy's scary, check out Michael, and it's almost like as an opener to the whole movie, they're being okay, admit it, Michael's scarier than Freddy.
Try my best to improvise a synopsis for this film, and then you're gonna tell me how I did.
Sure.
All right, here I go. Okay, so 10 years after the events of the first film, we have teenage Tommy Doyle and Lindsay Wallace living across the street from each other in Haddonfield. Haddonfield is still traumatized by the events of the first film, so Halloween is perennially canceled. The adults in the town are all freaked out and uptight about Halloween. They'll do anything in their power to keep it from infiltrating the town and their kids. So there's no costumes, there's no scary movies, there's none of that shit. They're it's all locked down. And the kids, including Tommy and Lindsay, have kind of had enough. They want to live normal lives. They're not freaked out like their parents are. Lindsay doesn't even remember the events of the first film. She's got some trauma blockage there. Tommy is now a teenage rebel, doing all sorts of bad shit, and nobody seems to really get him or like him in this film. And so as the film progresses, Michael Myers is kind of re-released onto Haddonfield as a supernatural entity. He kind of comes back kind of personification of the town's fear and paranoia, because Michael Myers, on paper, is dead. He exploded at the end of Halloween 2. There's no way to sort of get out of that, along with Loomis. But he's been resurrected as this supernatural entity because everybody's still talking about him. And it's a lot, as you were just saying, it's exactly the Freddy Krueger thing, where like power by thinking about him and being scared of him, and the more you do that, the more he's able to sort of operate. And so he does, he operates, he kills a bunch of people, and it kind of all climaxes in this big fiery inferno scene at the drive-in, which leads to Michael Myers like absorbing bullets and like growing to 12 feet tall until he eventually kind of explodes. I'm not totally sure what happens there. Anyways, at the end, Tommy and Lindsay decide to run away together, faking their own deaths because they're in love, I guess, which I was shocked to read at the end. Yeah, okay, how did I do? Like, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much of that would you agree with?
I think you nailed it. You know, nine out of 10.
All right, so what do you think about this Tommy and Lindsay stuff? They're kind of the lead characters, right?
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I like the idea that, you know, they would have taken the same characters from the original and, you know, reimagined them in real time, basically, because this would have been like, you know, 10 years after the first one. They would have been teens in high school, you know?
I know.
Or right around there.
And it's funny because we're about to head into Halloween Kills and we're bringing both of these characters back for, well, the first time in a really long time. Obviously, we were talking about how Tommy came back in number 6, but I don't think we've seen Lindsay ever.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think it would have been a great way to do it. You know, as much as I like the Jamie Lloyd character, I think this could have been another way to really grab the teen audience and make it feel palpable and relatable to them. You know,
you were talking about there's a really striking nightmare at the beginning. Do you think you could like try to tell us what's going on in that scene?
Yeah, I mean, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's the Lindsay's mom, Mrs.
Yeah.
Wallace, is, you know, having a dream that she can't find her daughter on Halloween. She hears her scream. She's running through town, and she finds herself in front of the Myers house, you know, and she goes up and goes inside the Myers house, and everything's kind of like sticky and
Yeah.
you know, a little, there's like a weird haze to everything. She touches a
Yeah.
lamp and it's sticky. She touches some furniture and it's sticky. We realize that the room is covered with blood. You know, she looks around, there's carnage everywhere. She sees Lindsay at the top of the stairs, and in a very Freddy Krueger moment, there's some sort of like slashing effect, and Michael Myers like comes out of her body as she screams and wakes up in bed. It's all very Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah, she like cracks open and Michael Myers like emerges out of her. It kind of gave me kind of Malignant vibes. Do you see that at all?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I can imagine
I just
it
saw
that
Malignant
well.
for the first time, like this weekend, by the way. I'm
Oh,
the
it's
last
an
person
amazing
to have seen
film.
it. It's not what I was expecting at all. I don't know what I was expecting, but it certainly wasn't that.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. Yeah. So Michael emerges as a supernatural entity. How do we feel about that? About him no longer living? Because I think part of what scares a lot of people about Michael Myers is that he's there's a certain realism with him. Like he's just like this relentless dude that could be in your town. So I mean, turning that into something bigger, how did that work?
I mean, it would have been bold as hell, and I think it would have been very divisive. You know, but at the end of the day, you know, Jason is corporeal, but he's also supernatural. He's some sort of revenant or zombie, if you want to get technical. But I mean, it was kind of like, you know, putting him in this realm, I think, to compete with Freddy. You know, almost like I said, the film cinematically, you know, is like a Michael versus Freddy sort of thing. It's saying that he can go toe to toe in Freddy's world. I do like how they kind of give you a little bit of a possibility that Michael could be alive. They mentioned something about how they couldn't differentiate his bones from Loomis's bones, and, you know, who knows, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, so, right. Wait,
in the beginning, at least, you can kind of entertain the idea that maybe he's not supernatural. But of course, by the end, it's revealed that he absolutely is when he regrows fingers and, you know, swells to 20 feet tall. There's no denying that Michael Myers is supernatural. But I do like that you were saying before, him being a manifestation of the town's fears. It's not only similar to A Nightmare on Elm Street, it's similar to Candyman, where, you know, but the original source material was kind of like, you know, the villain needs to be feared in order to exist, you know, and Tommy like had the right idea where he's all, just don't give it any power, you know, he's dead, you know, Michael Myers is dead. But because the parents were so obsessed with canceling Halloween, essentially keeping the children afraid, their fear brought Michael back to life.
Yeah, you kind of get the sense that the adults who are really kind of the antagonists of the film at its heart. Because even though they kind of have good intentions, like, Lindsay's mom is horrible. She's doing everything in her power to keep her daughter basically gaslit and, like, under her power so that, I guess, nothing bad can happen to her. But she comes across as, like, unhinged and terrible. The whole town kind of isn't painted in a good light in this film. I mean, it's kind of true, though. If you fixate on something long enough, if you're, like, you can kind of manifest things. I'm not a hooju juju guy, but I do kind of believe that. Is that something that's, like, can you buy that? Do you think you can manifest
sure.
something
I think
if
it
you
is
freak out
something
about
that
it
we
enough?
see in. Yeah, I think it's something we saw recently in horror. Did you see The Empty Man? I know that was kind of controversial, but the whole concept of that one
Yes.
is that you just
Yes.
imagine a being into existence. And isn't that what we're talking about here with Michael Myers? Essentially they created a tulpa just by focusing on this dead thing. They gave it power beyond the grave.
Absolutely. It's kind of like The Secret, but like the evil inverted version of The Secret.
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
love it. And it is exactly Freddy Krueger, right? It's like
It
the
really
exact
is.
Freddy Krueger setup.
It
which I
really
like.
is. And so I feel like the very first scene was kind of like saying, like, look, Michael Myers can outdo Freddy. Then we have this building towards this climax you were talking about, the drive-in theater. So we should kind of like set the stage a little bit. It's the way they describe it is like a drive-in marathon where there are actually 3 screens going simultaneously, so you can watch
Which is
any
awesome.
one or all of them at the same time. It's just like totally wild.
Yeah.
So there's one point that they describe Psycho, Psycho 2, and Psycho 3 all playing simultaneously, and noting that there's this spans 25 years for Anthony Perkins, him in different stages of his life. So
okay, have you seen any of the Psychos other than Psycho 1? Have you seen 2, 3, and 4?
I've seen them all. Yeah,
you've seen them all. Can I just say, I don't know if this is controversial, it's probably not. I'm a big Psycho 4 fan. Mick Garris, Psycho 4, like, I like that movie. I don't think it gets enough love. It's truly wild.
It is truly wild. Again, I think by then we're getting into the 90s, right? So I was kind of like, all I can tell you is that I've seen it. But I
the
do
90s are a little
remember-
hazy, Josh. I can tell, and I like it.
I mean, I remember Psycho 2.
Which is also not bad.
Very detailed, very detailed. I remember Psycho 3, very detailed. That opening
See, that
sequence.
one I don't remember that well.
There's this opening sequence where he's like taxiderming a little bird, and it flashes to all of a sudden he's taxiderming his second dead mom, and sewing up her wrist and stuff. It's
nice.
It's really wild, yeah. So Psycho 2
that.
with this like nun character, so good stuff. Psycho, I really enjoyed the Psycho 2 and Psycho 3.
I love those Psycho sequels. I remember Psycho 2 really shocking me. Meg Tilly, the Meg Tilly vehicle, right. Psycho 2, get into it. The third one I remember not liking as much as everything else, but I remember being interested by the fact that Anthony Perkins was behind the camera. Yeah, so getting back to the story of Halloween 4. So we were talking about how it was all kind of building up to this big finale in the drive-in sequence. Do you want to try to like sort of paint a picture for how it all ended up?
Okay, here's what it is. Tommy's off somewhere with a gun after escaping from police custody. Lonnie is hanging out. Is Lonnie hanging out at the...
Yes, Lonnie is with his friends and they're there, yes.
Okay, Lonnie is there, and somehow also Lindsay's gonna arrive there. But Lonnie is like hanging out with, he's like the fifth wheel. He's with 2 other couples, and they're in this converted hearse. And first one couple's in the back kind of making out, and Lonnie kind of like dozes off, and the other couple goes in back, and he's like, oh man, I'm just up here by myself. He kind of dozes off. He comes to, and kind of like steps out. That's when they have this moment with the fog rolling in at some point eventually. But basically, he like tries to wake up his friends, pulls the blanket off of them, and there are 2 dead, mutilated couples. He starts freaking out, running from car to car. Every making out couple and every teenage couple in every car has been like slaughtered. This is where he ends up. The fog rolls in as the fog plays on the screen, and he makes his way towards the projection booth, and Michael Myers appears in the projection booth. Where's that moment I was explaining where, for a moment he's superimposed over Jason in Friday the 13th, and Jason burns away and Michael remains. Michael jumps out of the projection booth. He's running, towards Lonnie to try to kill Lonnie. Maybe even does. I don't even remember. The point is, by this point, Lindsay and Tommy are both there.
Yeah.
And Michael's, he's gonna kill Lindsay finally, and everyone's there, and the cops all arrive at this point. And finally, backup, who they called for backup in Act One,
Hmm.
and backup doesn't arrive until the very end at Act Three. Backup
Classic
arrives. All of a
backup.
sudden, you've got cops circling the drive-in with shotguns. Tommy's up there with a gun he stole from a cop earlier. Michael Myers grabs Lindsay. He's about to like kill her. All the cops unleash their weapons. Lindsay drops, and Michael Myers basically just starts absorbing all of these bullets. His fingers got bitten off by a dog earlier in Act One, and his fingers grow back, and then he grows to this monstrous height, like you're describing. I think 20 feet is what it says in the
Huge, like
script.
supernatural. Yeah, the shape like reshapes into this like giant Michael Myers. Very strange.
Right. So it's pretty wild. I mean, I imagine people at the time watching that just going like, "What the fuck," And
Yes.
there's a final confrontation with Tommy where he rescues Lindsay, but like, no, okay, I said that wrong. In this final confrontation, it appears as though Tommy and Lindsay explode. There's a big explosion. They fire all these things at Michael Myers. What was it that caused him to explode? Was it when Tommy shot him or something?
Something I think falls. I feel like he's absorbing all these bullets and it's just making him stronger. But I feel like some kind of electricity pole or something falls and like there's a huge explosion.
Yeah,
and
there's a huge explosion.
Yeah, he just ends up exploding. Yeah.
Yeah, somehow Michael Myers just explodes, and it seems pretty clear that Tommy and Lindsay have died in the explosion. Do you want to tell the final scene?
Yeah, sure. So Michael Myers is supposedly defeated, but we feel like our leads are dead. And then we go to the next scene, and it's Tommy and Lindsay, and they've run away together, and they're like camping out in some abandoned barn, and they've decided to let their families think that they have died in the fiery wreck, so that they can escape their overbearing town and parents and the ghost of Michael Myers, and they're just gonna run away together. And they're in love now, which I did not see coming, by the way, at all. Kind of felt crammed in at the end. Did you see their love blooming before this moment, or is this just me?
No, I mean, it didn't like shock me. I mean, it's a total Hollywood capper, but at the same time, they had set you up with the whole fact that like, Lindsay didn't have any other worthy or significant love interest. Tommy wasn't interested in other girls. They had this shared trauma that, they each understood each other better than anyone else could, even though for the bulk of the movie, Lindsay couldn't even remember her confrontation with Michael in Halloween 1978.
Right. And Tommy does call Lindsay a bunch of times throughout the film, and her mom like won't let him talk to her. Right. So I guess that kind of adds up to that too.
One thing you didn't mention though, which I think is worth noting, is the film does end with another nightmare. Of like Michael Myers delivering a final jump scare. Am I right?
Can you paint me that picture? Because I read it today.
I mean, it's just like after. It's almost like one of those fake wake up scenes. It's the day after the explosion. It's the day after the horror movie marathon.
Right.
Tommy and Lindsay are waking up in the barn. She hears something at the barn door. The barn door opens and it's Michael Myers there. And then she wakes up in the barn again.
Yes. Scary.
So
also
they do again, leave for that's a very Nightmare on Elm Street thing to do, the way they framed it. It is. And it also puts, the fact that, Michael Myers is still in her mind. She still has some fear of him, which I guess leaves the possibility for another supernatural manifestation.
Yes, there's that seed of fear. It's just like Freddy. It's why they have to give all those kids what's the sleep medication?
I know what you're talking about. Tripinol or something goofinol.
Oh, people are screaming at us from their car, but you know what? It's fine.
I know.
Yeah, that's how it ends. I like an 80s horror movie sequence in a barn. It's very Friday the 13th part 3 and 5.
Absolutely.
And I like that. There's something spooky about a barn. I think it's all those sharp things, all those sharp equipment. Get it out of here. Have you seen Behind the Mask?
I have. Love it. And I love the actor Nathan Bassell. He's great. Angela, the lead, she's wonderful. Yeah. I've met them at conventions several times, and they're just really wonderful people.
I'm so jealous.
Yeah.
Yes, I did an episode recently on the sequel that never happened, and it's one of the most tragic, I would say, horror movies that
Yeah.
didn't occur. Love that movie. Lots of good barn sequences in that one. Heading into conclusions, thoughts on this alternative Halloween 4? Like, compared to what we got, how did it stack up?
I mean, I think it stacked up great. You know, like I said, I think it would have been hugely divisive with the supernatural Michael Myers.
Oh,
But
yeah.
I can't say it would have been worse than, Halloween 4, a movie I'm very fond of.
Hmm.
It kind of, makes me sad to think of a timeline where our Halloween 4 doesn't exist, where maybe Jamie Lloyd
Hmm.
never even exists. But at the same time, had this come to fruition, I think it would have been an exciting new direction that brought Michael back in a way that would have been really fresh. And it's interesting hearing how much John Carpenter was supportive of this version, because it really
Very.
rewrites Michael in some radical ways. And it seems like everything else, he's really critical, so critical of the Rob Zombie films for trying to bring Michael into a new space, but he was really supportive
Yeah.
of this one. And something else you can tell throughout the script is just what an homage it is to Carpenter in general. There's another scene where someone's watching Assault on Precinct 13.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
are other John Carpenter films that play during the movie marathon. We talked about The Fog already, but
Yeah.
Christine is one of the films that they
Oh,
play at the movie
yeah.
marathon. So it's very much homage to John Carpenter and a celebration of him as a filmmaker.
Yeah, big time. And Dennis Etchison has collaborated with Carpenter so many times. As I mentioned, he is responsible for the novelization of The Fog, Halloween 2, Halloween 3. So these guys are tight, and it seems like they wrote it very close together. Like Etchison would go to his house, and they would sit on the floor cross-legged, and they would talk about the script, and he would give him notes. So it sounds like he was really involved. And the fact that the studios decided to go against it is the reason John Carpenter just sold his stakes in the entire property. So it's kind of historic, actually, this Halloween 4 sequence. Yeah, all right. So I think that sounds like some good overall feelings and conclusions. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
I mean, I think that's my take on the film. A really enjoyable script. I don't read a lot of screenplays.
Mhm.
So I wasn't sure if it would translate from the page to an imagined cinematic experience, but this screenplay does that very well. It's not terribly. I mean, it is complex when you start talking about like what is Michael Myers. Tommy telling everyone that Michael's dead. Michael only being alive because the adults won't let him die. It's complex, but at the same time, the narrative is really straightforward, like a Halloween film should be. It's very
Totally.
much Halloween day and Halloween night, with a big climax. So
And it doesn't take
I
itself
think it would have been
too
a great
seriously.
film.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
wish I could have seen it. I think ultimately it may have made for a better film, but I don't know if it would have sparked interest in the franchise in the same way that this other Halloween 4 did. So it who knows? Would we even have the rest of the franchise afterwards if this is what we got? It's hard to say. Okay,
it really
Josh.
is.
Where can people find you online if you would allow them to find you?
I would love for them to find me on Twitter at Josh _Millican Millican. Yeah, come give me a follow. For the most part, I just retweet a lot of the great content from Dread Central and some of our partner programs. But occasionally, I'll let you know a personal thought or two.
And I let you go, is it okay if we disclose what's coming up in your personal life in the next little while?
Yeah,
Because it's pretty exciting.
yeah. Absolutely.
Do you want to let us
My
know?
wife and I are about to welcome our first son, very fittingly in the month of October. Actually,
Hell yeah!
I don't know your release schedule, but by the time starting this next chapter of my life, and yeah, super exciting time for me personally.
Everything
Just
works
in
out.
time. I mean, we
Just
are
in time.
technically right around full term, so
I knew
it
it.
could be days, it could be weeks, it could be days.
I'm really excited for you guys, and thank you for taking the time to come talk about Halloween 4 with me. This was super, super fun. All right, well, thank you so much for listening, and we'll be back with another episode of Development Hell. Coming soon to Dread, Val. Finn, a wanted criminal, hides out with an escort named Val, a demon. Val offers to make all of his problems disappear if he follows her rules. She has been expecting him all along, and it won't be easy to escape Val's dungeon. You can catch Val on October 5th, and on Blu-ray, November 2nd.